Is North Korea issuing some self deletion instructions to its own soldiers? Just why would they be doing this? And are North Korean soldiers themselves making sure that their battle buddies don't leave the battlefield alive? Just what sort of nonsense are they being fed? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. And plus, I think there's just a little more to the story than the U.S. and Ukraine are letting on. Let's get into it. Okay, so this is a really interesting story about North Korean soldiers where I'm going to have to avoid using the no word because the YouTube algorithm thinks we're all 6 years old. Russia is deploying those North Korean soldiers in indeed human wave attacks. The U.S. confirmed Friday. If you've been listening to this channel, you know that we've been able to see this with our own eyes since at least last week. But what's interesting is that the White House confirmed that some North Korean soldiers have taken their own lives rather than surrender to Ukrainian forces, or rather than be captured by Ukrainian forces. These were done, according to spokesman Kirby, quote, likely out of fear of reprisal against their families in North Korea in the event that they're captured. Now, South Korea's National Intelligence Service confirmed on Friday that one North Korean soldier who was publicly recognized to have been captured had passed away the previous day. Now, what is interesting is that while Zelensky claims at least 3,000 North Korean soldiers have died or been wounded, the U.S. is quoting more than 1,000 North Korean soldiers have died, which this is just classic. This is why some of non-specialist war reporting drives me absolutely freaking crazy, is because they say, let's see if I can find it here. They say Kirby quoted a lower death toll among North Koreans, right? Now, I want to point out that 3,000 dead or wounded is about the same death toll as 1,000 KIA, right? Because as we know in this conflict, for every one KIA, there's about two who are wounded, or at least wounded seriously enough that they can't return to the battlefield. And so, again, the fact that this very simple distinction between dead and wounded, or losses, as it's sometimes called in military parlance, and just pure KIA or pure dead, is sort of insane. That you can be a writer for a major news outlet and be like, not understand that they gave the exact same statistic. But Kirby also added that North Koreans are conducting, quote, massed dismounted assaults against Ukrainian positions in Kursk, which, again, if you're following this channel, you know we've already been talking about. And the fact that they are massed and dismounted is itself a huge problem because the Russian troops have abandoned massed assaults almost a year ago, relying instead on small 3 to 4 man teams to conduct essentially infiltration and reconnaissance by fire missions. And then those identify targets, which are then used by FPV drones to finish the job, so to speak. And the fact that North Korea is returning these human wave tactics is in part a sign that North Korean troops not just are treated as expendable, right? Russia treats its own troops as expendable, but that the North Korean troops are not given the most up-to-date Russian tactics. And I've shared my theories on this before, that it's either a function of the fact that the North Koreans just cannot conceive of the idea that the Russians know more about their tactics than they do, or they're so indoctrinated in North Korean propaganda that they can't conceive of the idea that their leadership isn't giving them highly effective tactics, that their tactics could need to be adjusted in the face of a real battlefield, because that would mean then that, remember, Kim Jong-un, who is revered as a god, is wrong. It's sort of like finding out that God is real, but he screwed up a bunch of things because he's dumb. That's not really something that a religious zealot can conceive of. And so the idea that they were trained in outdated Soviet-era tactics, and that they need to change their tactics might not be conceivable. But I'm less inclined to believe that second explanation because we've seen in one of the captured North Korean notebooks that someone had taught him a tactic to deal with drones. And that means that they do have a level of tactical and operational flexibility that doesn't necessarily crack their larger worldview, which is interesting because, as Kirby points out, quote, the North Korean soldiers appear to be highly indoctrinated, pushing attacks even when it's clear those attacks are futile, right? He added they're being sent to the front with minimal protection and we're suffering a great deal of losses. But then he added one last detail that the Ukrainians are unable to capture them as prisoners. He said, quote, their own people are executing them. And this I thought was really interesting because, okay, there's a bunch of stuff I want to talk about here. I literally need to like make a list of it. But we're going to look at some of the instructions that are issued to North Korean soldiers. But first, before we get into all of that, I needed to make 2 requests of you guys. The first is to hit subscribe. It helps me. It helps tell the YouTube algorithm that I'm one of the legitimate creators putting out real information and analysis. But more importantly, if you want to give those North Korean jerks a let them ring in the new year with a bang, you can help the Ukrainians do it by donating to our fundraiser. You guys know I was in Ukraine recently. We're still working on getting those videos edited and up. But the units that help me out, I of course want to help them out as well. In some cases, they risk their lives in order to speak with us and in order to get us to their headquarters and locations. So, of course, we're going to try to hook them up with what they need the most, which includes drones, jammers, battery packs, night vision devices, and energy supplies. So if you can donate, right, we've got a ton of cool swag for you. Basically, the swag starts at around $200 because that's about the cost of an FPV drone. So you buy these guys an FPV drone, they'll hook you up with a unit patch. But by the way, for 5,000 buckaroonies, you get something that is literally only 2 of, as far as we know, only 2 exist in the world. This is Bakhmut Sparkling Wine. Because remember, before Bakhmut was destroyed in the Battle of Bakhmut, it was the home to one of Ukraine's largest champagne bottling factories. And one of the soldiers we met with from the 93rd who was defending Bakhmut, before they withdrew from the factory, saved 2 of the bottles. So if you are interested in owning what's basically a super prestige item, literally only 2 of exist in the whole world, you can make that big donation. And I want to point it out. This is sort of like saying, imagine if you had wine from like Stalingrad, right? That's what this is. So if you're a military history nerd and you want to own a piece of history and you want to help put some rounds in crowns, well, this is the way to do it. Now, the link of all that is, of course, in the description. Now, let's talk about a bunch of things. But first, I wanted to point this out, right? This is allegedly a leaked set of instructions that were given to North Korean soldiers in Kursk. And what I want to point out is that some people say that there's some arguments that it's fake, right? I went to the r/Korea subreddit or whatever, and there was some dispute over the wording. But some people think that the wording may sound South Korean, in part because the Russians translated it. But it may also sound South Korean because there might be doctrinal things that were integrated. It's tough to say. But the pamphlet reads as this, right? It says, death is not the end, but the beginning of eternal glory. Remember, warrior, the true fear is not death, but shame before one's country. Being taken prisoner is a betrayal of one's comrades, family, and nation. Only those who choose honor over weakness will become examples for future generations. Your death on the battlefield will be a symbol of courage and fortitude. Shame outlasts life, but glory of a hero is eternal. Then it adds, hold the grenade tightly to your hand, place it under your chin or under your body armor, pull the pin, and release the safety pin boldly. And this, of course, aligns with other instructions that we saw issued to Russian troops, also providing similar instructions to avoid what we'll call avoiding capture. And I want to point out, I think there's some coded language in here that a North Korean would understand, right? And that is the shame, eternal glory, glory of a hero, shame outlasts life. So when they say shame outlasts life, it's a reminder that in North Korea, there's a lot of collective and familial punishment. So if one of your family members, your son, your brother, your daughter, right, your husband, were to bring shame to themselves, the punishment would be meted on the families. And that's to create an incentive for, against like defecting or fleeing or somehow leaving North Korea. Because as long as there is some family member left behind that you care about, they will be punished. They'll be sent to most of the intelligence that I've read indicates that they're sent to work camps where they're effectively worked to death. But imagine knowing that you fled North Korea, but it meant that your mom and dad were going to be worked to death in a work camp, right? So that's how this sort of thing keeps. And the fact that they say, "Hey, you'll bring shame upon the shame will live beyond your life," meaning the shame will carry to others around you. Um, and the shame of, again, of being captured, even if you were to live, even if you were to die later, is a great shame. But then they said the glory of a hero is eternal. So this is a carrot or stick statement, right? They also use the word eternal glory, right? And remember, you see, shame and glory are seen as juxtaposed here, right? And examples for future generations. I think this is coded language that a North Korean would understand to mean that if you will die in battle, that your family status will be elevated tremendously, that you'll receive, that they'll receive either perhaps a fast track to Communist Party membership, perhaps they'll receive additional benefits or resources in the form of housing or food as kind of honored war, a family of honored war dead. And so it's a reminder that, hey, you bring shame upon us, your family is going to be cooked. But you bring honor by being an honored war dead, you will then be enabled. You will grant them tremendous resources in a country where resources are very, very tightly controlled. And so it does this and then provides, of course, instructions to do so. And this I thought was really interesting because I think it sort of reveals a bunch of information that it helps us understand more of the information we're receiving. The first is that you may have seen some earlier videos from about a week or two ago, in which there were a collection of bodies of North Korean soldiers who had been killed in a mass assault, but they were lined up very evenly, one after the other, clearly indicating that, and they were all in sort of a narrow position, right? In a almost like they were being laid in a coffin. And what makes this interesting is that someone must have taken the time to position those bodies in that order. And what this indicates, again, some of these rumors that North Korean soldiers are being executed by their own people indicates that perhaps the dead and wounded were being inventoried, for lack of a better term, and that an assault had failed, but other North Korean troops or the few survivors gathered the dead and wounded, lined them up to count to make sure everyone was accounted for, and then finished off the critically wounded, or finished the critically wounded, and then organized them to say, okay, we need to make sure that you're either alive or dead, that no one has been captured or unaccounted for. Of course, we saw that drones swarmed that position, making it even more difficult and inflicting even more casualties. So this would indicate that there's some guidance there that says avoid capture at all costs. But then you have to say, okay, given that reality, what exactly would you say if you were Ukraine and you were South Korea and you did capture a soldier? What would that soldier ask to be about their status, right? What would that soldier want to be the publicly disclosed status? Well, they'd want to be declared KIA, right? Because obviously they don't want their family in a gulag. They want to be in a work camp, right? They want to be elevated in status. And so, in all likelihood, right, on one hand, a captured soldier may choose to self-eliminate, right? I feel like a complete idiot not being able to use clear, straightforward, explicit terminology, but God help you, YouTube. But these North Korean soldiers, right? One, he may have said, I've been captured. He may have realized what that meant. He may have been so critically wounded that he couldn't do it. But I think it's also highly likely that South Korean and Ukrainian intelligence service came to him and said, congratulations, you have just died in custody. We'll put out a public statement. We'll make it very clear. And here's your new identity. You're a captured Russian soldier from Tatarstan named, Vladimir Putinsky or whatever. Because you see here, there's another statement from Zelensky that says several North Korean soldiers were captured, but they were, quote, seriously wounded and could not be resuscitated. right? And it says that suggests that many of them were also killed by their comrades. But what I think is interesting is to say, listen, North Korea, we know that you're sacrificing a lot of your own people just to make sure you know that no one's been captured. And Ukraine is saying, yeah, those guys you couldn't find, they're all dead too. Don't worry. They're totally all dead, right? This is bizarre because they never make these kind of statements about Russians. But the North Koreans, again, they're like, listen, they're dead. They're dead. We couldn't resuscitate them. Don't worry. Their unit commanders, by the way, unit commanders absolutely finished them off. There was no chance we could resuscitate them. They were barely alive. An easy mistake to make. In reality, is that true? Are those soldiers indeed KIA? The South Koreans would say no. And here's the thing, guys, with battlefield medicine. If you're alive when you're brought to a combat surgical center, a stabilization point, there is something in the areas of like an 80 to 85% chance that you'll survive, longer term. You'll survive the next 12 months. And so the idea that masses of soldiers are being found, or that even any kind of substantive number of soldiers are being found alive, but die in custody, is very unlikely. Right? It's much more likely that that they are alive. They're simply being given an out to protect their families, right? Because again, the rules are just different, right? The normally, right, Russia has these POW exchanges. They accept being captured as a part of aggressive combat operations. North Korea just doesn't have that. Preserving any data, preventing the South Koreans from getting any data about North Korean military operations is just so important to them that they just cannot afford to lose any of these troops. Anyway, guys, that's all I had. Huge thank you to all the Colonel tier members, particularly Bill Collier, Robert Coburn, Gaius Marnie, Gina Questa, Chris Gorsuch, Francis Carias, AL90, Petch Taru, all of our Lieutenant tier members. We could not do this without you guys. I appreciate you so much, and I will see each of you guys in the next one. Cheers.